Good afternoon. My name is Pasha Baker. I'm the director and CEO of the Goldsboro Westside Community Historical Association, Incorporated, and we are here with the lovely Miss Alexia. She is from down south, and she is one of the curators here at the Rollins Museum of Art, and they have a new exhibition that's been with them for some time. And I think, when is this exhibition over? Ally is a Verb?
It concludes on May 8th of this year.
May 8th, 2022. If you have not seen Ally is a Verb, please come down and visit. This is in partnership with Bros in Combo, our LGBTQ plus brothers and sisters. So we wanted to feature this artist, Ally is a Verb, and this exhibition during Black History Month, and let us know that all Black lives matter. So we wanted to get with Alexia to feature and show us, why did you choose Ally is a Verb for this time period? And think it's important to your collection here at Rollins.
Absolutely. So happy to have you all here in partnership. And Ally is a Verb is actually a new strategic initiative that we've been developing at the Rollins Museum of Art in partnership with the greater campus at Rollins College. Every year there is an RCC class grouping, which is basically Rollins' run initiative to indoctrinate all of its incoming freshmen into what it means to be a global citizen.
That's right.
And so,
global citizens.
Global citizens, yes. So as part of a well-rounded liberal arts education. And so how that happens is that across disciplines, you have this rotating theme, which this year's, for the fall of 2021, was activism and allyship. And so what happens there is, how does that manifest in the humanities, in the sciences, in math? And so this was our first time contributing to that curriculum, and we did it as we do best, through an exhibition. And that's how, those are the roots of how this program came together.
And we're definitely big proponents of humanities, because how you did it then is the same way you can do it now. And as we were speaking earlier off camera and offline, as she was showing me around this beautiful museum, if you have not been in some time, come and visit. Beautiful piece of property, parking right out in front, no barriers. You just come onto campus. At the end of Holt Avenue, around the roundabout, sits the museum. Beautiful, beautiful mass, beautiful gallery, all the exhibitions in this museum and their collections and permanent collections as well as your features for Black History Month. This movie took a look at as well. But for this exhibition, when you speak about the humanities, how we solved problems yesterday is the same way we solve problems today. When we look at the civil rights movement, and then how it relates to the Black Lives Matter movement of today. If we look at voting rights back then and look at the Voting Rights Act of today, same way we solved those problems back then is the same way we do it today. No difference. So I'm excited. Let's take a look at what you got, Alexia.
Let's get started.
All right. Is this part of it?
So this is one of our first pieces, and one that I think possibly more than any other speaks to this conversation of what it means to be an ally. And as you said, these systems, how we've done things is how we will continue to do things.
That's right.
And that's for the good and for the bad, because the problems and the barriers we've encountered are the ones that we keep coming up to.
That's right.
And so one artist that just tackles these conversations so wonderfully is Nick Cave, and he's possibly one of the most prolific and critical artists working today. A professor over at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, mostly in terms of his academic work, known not just for the visual arts, but also textiles and fashions. That's actually how he got his start, which, looking at this video installation behind me, isn't surprising. We see it in the detailings of these costumes, which is what he is best known for. So as we watch this, we'll see all these different suits. Right now they're falling, but eventually they'll be dancing, and these bodies of work are known as sound suits. And he's made over 500 of this, the first one being made back in '92. And while they're very bright and colorful and cheerful and made to be danced in and performative, at its core, they are incredibly critical of these social systems, and their story of how they came to be is one that is quite somber. So if we go back to '92, when the first suit was created, that was a really important year in America. We picked the epicenter to be Los Angeles.
That's right, the riots.
Absolutely. So in 1991, he was working and living in Los Angeles during the incident with Rodney King riots, but the initial incident of the beatings. And so, for any of you who were alive back then or are familiar with the incident, this greeting was broadcast. So you have about 15 minutes of an African American man who had been involved in a high-speed chase with police officers, being pulled from the car and being subjected to
The beat.
the beatings, exactly, unnecessary force.
Yes.
And so, living with these images that were broadcast and this awareness put Nick Cave in a position of coming to terms with his own vulnerability existing in society during this time, and realizing there was a lack of concern and empathy for people in his community who were being forced to encounter this new awareness and kind of facing how visible they suddenly felt and targeted within just their everyday lives. And so he starts to think through these ideas, and these suits, which come in a variety of different styles, start to develop. Really from him walking out to the park to have a moment of quiet and seeing these twigs on the floor, and he's looking at these discarded materials, and he's thinking through these ideas of things that are cast off to the side and marginalized, because he is grappling with these things in his everyday life right now. And so that's how these were conceptualized. Like I said, they're called sound suits, and their function is to protect and hide the person who is wearing them. And by doing so, you're concealing things like gender, race, socioeconomic status. So they're
just
protective
humans.
armor. They're just people. Even though they're all different, you can't
Their soul
label
is the
them.
same. Yeah.
Exactly. And if you can't label, you can't assess and evaluate.
Differentiate.
Exactly. And so that's how they developed. They're all wearable sculptures, so they're not meant to be static, but rather in motion. And even though, as I mentioned before, they dance and they're bright, there is always an element of that urgency. In this piece specifically, we look at this figure here, you see that there's a stop sign on their back. So it's letting you know, pause, something's not right. And as the video comes to an end, the upbeat music is replaced by silence and heavy breathing, which lets you know that something is not okay as it seems. And I think that's such a beautiful and poetic way of underscoring that deep-seated awareness that is constantly a part of many people from communities that are marginalized in society even now, that it's easy to overlook if you're not stepping into those shoes. His work also engages the idea by W.E.B. Du Bois and the double consciousness that people from marginalized communities are constantly living in two worlds. You have who you actually are, but then you also have the awareness that you were perceived in a very different way by anyone who's in power. And so that was very true during the Great Migration at the beginning of the 20th century. It was true before then, it was true during the Civil Rights Movement, and it's true now.
Very nice. Very nice. And you also have some sculptures here?
We do. So we
Very
have several
beautiful.
different pieces. This one over, these,
Is this part of it?
this is part of it. So these are in
Really?
dialogue. This piece, one of my favorites in our collection, and it speaks to a much more
Oh, I
universal
see the
issue.
sculpted hangers now.
Yes, this is actually a closet, or it's made to appear as a closet, and it's by Cuban artist Juan Capote. And so he based his objects in a very Cuban specific experience but then he broadens it because struggles of the people are universal.
That's right.
It's
All
these
people.
cycles. So you see here, this closet is impossibly small, not actually useful. It's made of very cold metals rather than these warmer woods that we would associate with comfort and home. And it is empty, and that is kind of the core point of the work, because he loves to explore the psychology of objects in his work. And so the emptiness alludes to the fact that everyone who lives in Cuba now has an empty closet from families that were broken apart due to political strife.
That's right. That's right. A lot of people have families over there and over here, and yes.
Exactly. And so that emptiness becomes a presence. And I think that speaks to so many groups and so many experiences where we're living with the residue
And we
of other
see it
things.
now.
Absolutely.
How many people have to leave their houses from Ukraine? The war that
It's-
started 48 hours ago.
Exactly.
Most
You're
definitely
inheriting
universal.
universal. It's splitting of families, and this is
That's right.
something that will unfortunately continue, and
My
it's
God.
reflective in that way.
Beautiful, Alexia.
Over here we have a work that I think you will find very interesting. It's by
Yay.
Nina Chanel Abney. We are very excited to have this in our collection. We acquired it back in the end of 2020.
And this is, you acquired it. This
Yes,
is not
this-
alone.
All of these are part of our collection. They're all part of the, with the exception of the Nick Cave, which is the museum's permanent collection. The rest are part of the Alphon Contemporary Art Collection,
Wow.
which we steward for the Alphons.
Wow.
And so this work, Nina Chanel Abney is, she is a Black artist, part of the LGBTQ plus community. And during 2020, as many of us suddenly had a renewed appreciation for the outdoors, she started to take trips away from her studio into rural spaces. And she started to envision this freedom that could exist in these outdoor utopias outside of the views and the prying eyes of white dominant groups. And so what would it be like to be Black and to be part of the LGBTQ plus community and be free and not have to think about these eyes? So again, we're seeing that idea of the double consciousness that's so embedded in all of these works because it is part of that initial 20th century experience.
And
And
what is the symbolism like? The X here, the ghost here, the X is here.
So they're pretty heavily coded, as you've noticed. We have her very geometric style, which is all her own. But then we see that the figure itself is quite androgynous, and it's speaking
That's
to the
right.
freedom of being non-binary and now being encapsulated in this polarizing gender spectrum. And so if you notice, there are X's on the parts that would traditionally be female, and we do have the name Helen with the drip. So the title gives us a name, and automatically we're going to label that with a gender. But then the X's let us know maybe not.
But I love Helen with the drip.
Exactly, and the drip is very important, right? That phrase lets us know there's agency here. Helen has the power to be themselves, to be who they want to be.
And Helen doing a thing.
She
His
is.
or her.
They are doing their thing. And
There. Yes.
exactly, and so we also have this skull here, which is an allusion to a Memento Mori, which in art history, Nina is trained in the fine arts, has an MFA, so she should be aware of all of this history, alludes to thinking of your own mortality. And if we think of the time when this was developed, that carries many layers of interpretation, not just the pandemic.
In 2020,
Absolutely.
but the rise of the movement after the George Floyd killing.
Exactly. So all of this is happening at the same time, and
COVID-19.
and it leads to so many different ways of expressing that experience.
And definitely, and after so many minority communities were hit hardest by the pandemic. So
Absolutely.
it raises awareness. So definitely amazing. Oh.
And here we have a work.
I want to make sure this shows up on camera.
Yes. And in theory, so we're to protect the object, we're not encouraging touches, but if you were experiencing this as the artist intended, you would push back these petals, and that becomes really symbolic, that interaction with the artwork. Because this work by Elsa Maria Melendez, she's a Puerto Rican artist working in Puerto Rico and living in Puerto Rico. And she deals with art through a very feminist lens. So here we have what appears to be a flower, which automatically, in art historical terms, is connected to feminine genitalia historically, and we have at the epicenter something that looks like exactly the core of women's genitalia, but it's hidden. We can't get to it unless we pull these petals. And this piece is actually in response to PS 950, which was a law that was pushed for passing in Puerto Rico, which would limit access to safe and legal abortions for women.
Healthcare.
Exactly.
Oh, women's rights.
Women's rights in healthcare. And so she asks us to think about who writes these laws, usually men, and what power do they have, or what right do they have to dictate what happens to women's bodies exactly. And so by peeling these petals, the visitor becomes part of that because they're invading the space.
That's right. That's right. And I love the symbolism of pink.
Yes.
The Pink Panther. And what's the symbolism down here?
You know, these, they're pretty open in terms of interpretation, but because we use these to study as part of a curriculum, we've gotten so many interpretations from students that I love. And one of the ones that really stuck with me was that if you notice these noddings, it's instantly you think of sneaking out of your childhood bedroom, you know, you throw it over the window, but that's
Trying
just
to escape.
Escape, exactly, at the core of it. And I thought that was just so clever an interpretation. And these works, that's their point. It's to make us think and to have a slightly different relationship each time you see it.
I love that. And I love your use of, and what you're doing here, not featuring artists, but artists that are still alive.
Yes. So
that could
was
tell
really
their
important.
story.
So this is actually the second chapter of Ally as a Verb. We did the first part during the fall, and that featured an entirely different set of artists, but all of them living and all of them contemporary, because we thought it was so important to have artists that are still living these experiences, because their work, it's not just that they're traditionally from marginalized groups, but their work is an act of catharsis for them.
That's
it's
right.
an act of allyship for other people
It's
in the
moving
community.
art.
Exactly.
It
It's
keeps
action.
moving.
And that's why we ask, ally is a verb. It's not something that
action.
you just are, that you
Connected.
say you can be.
Yep.
It's something that you do.
Connected. Most definitely.
And
these are beautiful
yes,
pieces.
This is an entire series of protesters by Mexican artist Pedro Reyes.
All right, so we're going to walk with this
We're
one.
going to walk with this one.
All right.
So as you see, this one's a little taller. But if you notice, they hold placards and they hold megaphones, but the placards are empty. And that is because we have this collectives of bodies in protest, which I think rings a little different after 2020. But they're empty so that we can think of our own causes and the things that matter to us, so we can reflect our own ideas onto
Whether it
them.
be climate change, whether it be
Exactly.
voting, whether it be civil rights,
Absolutely.
whether it be women's rights.
Exactly.
Amazing.
And together we form a collective, and there's power in numbers, and that's something that matters a lot to Pedro Reyes and that he was thinking about as he was creating these figures. But we have them posed in relation to the work of these allies and these activists, and so together they're forming a coalition of sorts, and us as viewers,
the reason for this.
that's just so these
one.
don't topple. But as we're watching and we're reading these labels, which have direct quotes from the artist's testimony, we're doing the first step of what you need to do to be an ally, and that's to listen. To displace yourself outside the center circle and to just listen to these
And
words.
put yourself in somebody else's shoes.
Exactly.
That is a beautiful way to end it. I want to thank Alexia for her amazing presentation today. One, for her hospitality here at Rollins.
My pleasure.
This is our first time here, first of many partnerships.
Hopefully.
Most definitely, most definitely. Love to see you. Alexia, you're doing amazing things. Thank you for your contribution, and thank you for participating in our Black History Month series.
It was an honor to be included. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, see y'all later.